Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar with Anthony Iannarino titled How Sales Leaders Create Teams That Win Big. We will kick things off shortly with today's experts, but just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. If you're experiencing any issues with viewing our masterclass episode, let us know by utilizing the Q&A chat, and that's located on the right-hand side of your screen. Also, please use the Q&A chat to ask our experts questions today. They would absolutely love to answer them. We are recording this masterclass episode, and we will be sure to send you the recording within 48 hours after we conclude today. And then last but not least, and I'm just going to switch to our safe harbor slide. Just wanted to cover this as well. So basically, ZoomInfo is a publicly traded company, and this presentation may contain forward-looking statements. Any buying decision you make should be based only upon currently available products and offerings. Our complete safe harbor statement is here as well on the slide for your review. So thank you for checking that out. And we are going to kick things off today with a poll. So we would love your feedback here. If you want to just let us know what best represents your position so that our experts here can get a feel for who's in the room. So we're going to give you all a chance to answer that poll. And while we're doing that, we will give our experts a chance to introduce themselves. So Anthony, we will start with you.
All right, thank you. Good to see you. And thanks for joining us here today. We're going to have a great conversation about how you can lead and create teams that win big. My name's Anthony Iannarino. I'm an author, a speaker, a writer, a keynote speaker, and a facilitator of workshops. You can find me at thesalesblog.com, where I have posted every day now for 12 years. So something like 5,000 or so posts there. So go catch up.
And this is Sean Bartlett. I'm Senior Sales Director with ZoomInfo. I don't have the trail of expertise that Anthony has, but I'm a dad, I'm a husband, and I'm a leader. I absolutely love what I do, and I'm excited about the conversation today, and we're hoping you walk away with something to implement.
Awesome. Thanks both for that. All right, so we've given everybody some time, I think, to answer this poll. So we're going to display our results here and really get a feel for who's joining us today. It looks like we've got 17% from kind of a sales rep background, and then 31% sales manager, and then we've got a hefty weight here of 51% with sales leadership. So Anthony and Sean, we've got a good representation from the sales world here.
This is great.
It's great.
All right, so as we're talking about sales leadership, and one of the things that comes up is how to create and instill world-class standards. And a leader, they're responsible for navigating the path from here to there, from the current state, whether it's good or bad, to the future state, to one that is ultimately better. So Anthony, what are some considerations that sales leaders should really be thinking of as they're, as they level up their current teams?
That's a great setup. So one of the things that you have to start with is what's your vision? And so if you're looking for revenue growth, then you have to have a vision that says, this is where we're going to go and this is how we're going to get there. And you have to be able to share that with a team. But when it comes to the execution of actually going out and generating new revenue, you have to start with standards. And what I would tell you is that the best leaders have higher standards than leaders that don't generate the revenue and don't build the teams that they could. So what you want to do is look and say, like, what is the standard that I'm going to expect of my team? And I'll just give you a quick story about how I learned about standards. I had a great boss, and she was just very, very, very high standards. Like, nothing was good enough. You still have more capability, more potential in front of you. And I walked into our office one day, and there was a tiny scrap of paper on the floor that I didn't see. And she immediately chastised me and said, you walked right by that piece of paper. This lobby represents who we are. Go back and pick that up and throw it away, and never let anything cause people to think that we're not buttoned up and we're not a good company. And so that was just her general standard. And her general standard like that went to everyone. And one of the things that I'll tell you is that as a leader, you want to have meaningful standards, standards that cause somebody to have to do more than they're doing right now. And if you think about the best leaders you've ever had, whether it was a coach, whether it was a teacher, whether it was a preacher, whether it might have been one of your parents, the person that sees that you are capable of having a higher standard and then helps you see something in yourself so you maintain that standard, those are the only leaders you remember. The leader that says like, you're mediocre, so I'll probably just ignore you and I won't expect too much out of you, you're never going to remember that leader. They're going to remember you by how you help them become the person that comes after the person they are right now. So you do that in large part by standards.
That's great. And, you know, I love that. And leading with standards and talking about that, Sean, I guess when we talk about goal setting, you know, goal setting can sometimes feel like being Goldilocks, and you can't set an unrealistic goal, but you also want to make sure and caution on making it too easy for people. So I guess, Sean, how do you create the right goals for your teams and goals that are achievable but not too easy?
Yeah, so I'm sure you've all have heard of SMART goals at this point in your life. So I try to set them in two ways when it comes to goal setting. One from a long-term perspective, so they're specific, measurable, attainable, reasonable, and time-bound, right? So I make sure that there's long-term, and then we shorten that up on the focus of the short-term and then the immediate. So something that like a SMART goal that you're looking to attain could be, you know, I want to book 4 or 5 self-prospected meetings this week. So you have to have the mindset of like willing to set a goal or something for you to go after. Like if you're not going to write something down that you're going to achieve against, you're just doing the job. So what I find is super important is to, one, set a standard around that you're constantly going to be setting goals. As Anthony kind of talked about, like setting the standard. Like for example, like I expect my team to lead the charge of self-prospected meetings here at ZoomInfo. Some other things that I want them to do is like to challenge themselves to be outside or their comfort zone, like normally go and do something. So when we have internal huddles, I expect them to speak up because I want them to lead by example. But some simple things are for setting goals is like make sure you learn something new every day. Or for me, like I'm making sure that I'm teaching them something new every day. And for example, I recently had a rep come back from maternity leave, and we were showing them some ways you can attach videos to emails that are embedded in our Gmail. And she didn't know that we could do that. And she was like, I literally learned something new today. And she said, see, Sean, like you're always right. Like you definitely have to strive to learn something new today. But when you set goals, you set the standard for yourself to be better every day. And if you're taking the time to drive that growth mindset and set the standard and have a goal every day, something that you accomplish, it drives a level of satisfaction that you accomplish something, that you got something done. So not only does it have to be related to goal setting to sales, but it's also for your own, you know, personal belief in yourself and what you can accomplish.
Anthony, what about, I guess, like sales leaders with collaboration? So, you know, how do sales leaders encourage collaboration rather than having it be, you know, only heavy competition?
That's a cultural decision that the leader makes. And if the leader wants their team to collaborate, there's a number of things that you can do. I have a couple favorites that I like to impose on my team. And the imposition there is we're going to do a deal review. And one person is going to talk about their deal and they're going to explain their deal strategy. And the rest of the group gets to ask questions about why they're making some of these decisions, because I need everybody to help the rest of their team become more effective over time. So I'm not leaving that at chance, because a good salesperson with a good strategy and good language can help everybody else understand why they're pursuing that strategy, and also get the talk tracks so they have better language when they're talking to the client. But I wouldn't let that happen organically or naturally. I would manufacture meetings where we say, how do we address this client concern? Or how do we talk to them about this thing that we do and explain how it's differentiated from our competitor, and let people sit around and learn from each other. The concept is called Andragogy. It's how adults learn. Adults need to believe that they're learning something that's helpful for them right now, that it's going to be relevant to them, that they're going to be able to succeed when they use this information. And you can manufacture that by having deal reviews or having workshops where you ask people to contribute and you collaborate together so that everybody can get better. And the real competition isn't internal anyway. The real competition is like, we need to beat our competitors. I mean, that's what you're really trying to do is win against anybody else who's in your category. The better your team gets and the more effective they are, the better they're going to succeed.
Great. So I guess like moving on to creating a culture of accountability, Anthony, good company or team culture, it does start at the top, and it starts with you, it starts with all of us. So I guess, what does a culture with good accountability actually look like to you?
Yeah, for me, I would call it a positive culture of accountability. And there's a lot of research that's now been done on what makes a good team. And one of the things that makes a good team is how they communicate with each other, and how they address the culture. One of the things that we know is that you can't have a punitive culture and still have a positive culture at the same time. So if somebody's failing, somebody did something, it's not right. If you have a punitive environment where they're going to be punished, whether it's a formal punishment or it's just being ostracized or being criticized, any of those things, it destroys the positive part of the culture. And because we work in sales, we want to always have a positive mindset. We want to be empowered. We don't want to be negative. So you want to do something that says we're going to have a positive culture of accountability, which means no one's allowed to be negative and try to infect other people with that. And at the very same time, we also have to have consequences. So the way that you think about consequences is, if there's no consequence for doing certain things or not doing certain things, then you really don't have accountability at all. So you have to be able to do that. But we like humane consequences. What makes a positive culture is one where you can fail and get the help that you need so that you can get better. And as long as you keep progressing in that direction, you're safe in that culture. We know right now that psychological safety is a huge issue. We also know that 4.4 million people are quitting their jobs. The number 3 reason for people quitting their jobs is the relationship they have with their managers. So you need a positive culture, but you also do need to be willing to impose the consequences, humane consequences, which is like, because you didn't hit your quota, I'm going to make you sit and get some coaching from Sean, like 3 to 4 hours a week. And by the time he exhausts you with all that he's going to share with you, you'll just give up and do what we need you to do. I'm just teasing, Sean.
I think you know me enough that I wouldn't be like that, but
I was just teasing you.
I know you are. It's such an interesting topic here, and I definitely agree with what you just said. So I'm sorry, Dory. You can keep going.
Yeah. No, and it's funny, as Anthony was talking, like I was just thinking about my own previous experiences, with past employers and managers, and just how important it is to have that like open sharing and not being afraid to, make mistakes, right? And having the support from your manager. And I guess, Sean, leading into that, employees who feel cared for by their managers are more likely to come through. People who feel neglected, it's really hard. You don't feel very motivated. So I guess, like, what are steps sales leaders can take to really better to help like recognize and celebrate progress?
So this is a really great question, and something that's near and dear to me. And like, I would almost rather have a rep of mine on the call to answer this, because from their perspective is what really matters. So reps need to, at this stage because everybody's at home and not in front of people. So it's super important that they feel needed, that they feel welcomed, that it's kind of like the social emotional side of being an account executive, being a business professional now. So you have to be open to praise and celebrating up, like when they do something great. Get the right people involved. For me, it would be involving my vice president, Lou Wolf, or Steve Brierton, who I report to directly, or creating incentives, right, for your teams to go out and get, like things that keep them motivated and running. And then I don't know how many people have Slack or any form of internal like messaging system. Anytime a win happens, I'm calling them out. They each have their own little emoji that I assign to them. So when a win happens, like I adhere the entire group, they get an emoji and like all this other stuff, and they all love it. And like everybody's in there and adding their likes and whatnot. And like I've celebrated with music, I've used gamification just to create that collaborative environment. And it really helps when they feel that way and they feel that type of energy and that type of support, recognition, and attention is the big one. That type of attention, they'll run through walls for you. They will absolutely run through walls for you. And it's such an integral part of being a leader. And there's this sort of saying that I have 3 unique responsibilities for my team and for everybody that works for me. The first is to lead, and whether that's leading from the trenches or leading from above, however you want to look at it, it's critical that your presence is there, that they feel it, that there's a message, a mission, and vision for the group that they're fighting towards. The second piece is to mentor them, like provide them advice, understand what motivates them, understand their family life, like get them to open up to you. So when things are tough, they can come to you and never feel that they have to fight alone, and that they're always have somebody there that wants to help them. And then the third piece is manage, which Anthony kind of joked about. Like, if I don't do the first 2 things right and I have to manage, you do end up in those sessions where we're talking about like what's going wrong. And like, if I do the first 2 so very well, Dory, I don't have to worry about the last one. So like setting the standards, motivating them, making sure that they feel, welcome's not the word, but they have to like feel accomplished. And like, that's why I always talk about set a small goal, because when you're running a bunch of demos in a day, there's going to be times where you have crappy ones. But if you accomplish one goal, something good in that day that you have to look back to, it makes it worth it. Because the stress of sales is growing, and the ability to have interaction and conversations is shrinking unless you have the right information. So it's super important that they feel confident, they feel needed, they feel motivated, they feel that they can come to you for advice. I also try to keep an open relationship there where I want them to challenge me. Like, if you're not seeking out criticism and I don't feel that you need me, like there's something wrong. So just having an established open relationship. Don't make every one-on-one and interaction always about business. Lead with about them, what's going on in their world. It doesn't always have to be about business. Like, you have to relax the environment. So if there's something good that they want to tell you, if something bad that they want to tell you, that you're open to that environment.
Got it. Yeah, that's a great approach. But what about, okay, so I guess, what about when, we all have a bad week, salespeople for sure, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, Sean, what do you do? Like, what is your take on creating those appropriate consequences for like low performance? Like, how do you recommend a manager work with their sales reps to really kind of turn that around? It's tough, I'm sure it's not easy. It's a conversation to have.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting topic, but sometimes the reps don't realize there's a problem, and you have to guide them to understanding that there is a problem. And I have this saying with my team, like every interaction, whether it's a pipeline review or interaction with your friends, you're essentially running a discovery call because you're asking questions. And when you give somebody like a multiple choice situation, like, are you struggling with this? Are you struggling with that? Are you struggling with this? Are you struggling with that? You're giving them a response, like, instead of finding out what's going on in their world. Like, I don't know what you think about this, Anthony, but like, it's not my problem until I say it's my problem or it's come out of my mouth. if somebody tells me it's the problem, it's their suggestion that that's what my problem is. So like when I'm running a one-on-one and they're struggling, I'm always asking like, well, can you help me understand what were you thinking there? Or what would you have done different if you could do the situation all over again? And that's sort of like trying to get to the root of the problem. And then when we get to the root of the problem, and we talked a little bit earlier about this around accountability, it's okay, like now that we get to the root of the problem, like what do you think we need to do to solve this? I'm trying to get them to give me the answer. And then when they give me the answer, I'll say, okay, great. We have an answer. Do you feel confident in that? Awesome. And then I flip it right back to them and say, how do you want me to hold you accountable for this? And I just completely pause. And I let them talk me into how they want to be coached. And it's just something that's worked very well with me. So if there's ever a scenario or a situation, they can go back to it. Some other things that, we're definitely able to do is if they were doing really, really well at one point and things went sideways, like the benefit of working at ZoomInfo when you have chorus, and because we sell the solution, you can ask them to go back and listen to calls where things are going really well and self-assess and come back to you. So like there's so many different things that you can do, but like as far as like creating appropriate consequences when people are underperforming, I want to hear from them. I want to know what they think they should be doing or how they think they need to be changing so that they can set the plan and they create the measurement, and I'm not giving it to them. It's like it becomes their idea versus me telling them what they need to do.
Good stuff. Anthony, any feedback there?
That's it's a non-directive coaching approach, which I really like, Sean. And I think that one of the things that you said that might have gotten missed there that I think is critically important for leaders who are trying to build a winning team is when you ask your rep to describe to them what's going on, you're causing them to try to figure out the awareness of what's going on themselves. So it's not Sean saying like, you're not doing a good job making prospecting calls. That feels very different than if you say, tell me what's going on right now and what you're experiencing. And they're like, well, this is it. And they start talking about it themselves. And they start addressing the fact that, oh, I noticed this is going on. And they get this awareness of where their problem is. And it's much better if they get to that on their own than you coming up behind them and telling them like, you're having this prospecting problem. I would rather have them come to the awareness themselves because to Sean's point, it is their problem. They're the ones that have to solve the problem. Now we can help them, we can coach them, we can give them resources, we can do a lot of things to help, but they still have to make the behavioral changes. So once they get that awareness, it's now their responsibility to make those behavioral changes. And Sean, I love that you ask them at the end, like, how do you want me to hold you accountable for this? And again, it's their choice, it's their decision, and it gives them all of the empowerment to go and make those changes.
It was a big learning situation for me, Anthony, in all of this, because when I first started leading, and we've all been there, and if you haven't, and you tell me you haven't been what I'm about to say, like you're lying, but that's okay. What I will say is that you have this moment when you're leading, when you say like, well, I did it this way. Well, I did it this way. And like what I learned very early on is that if I put the expectations on my reps or on my leaders on how I've done it and what I've done and the way I do it, they'll fail 1,000% of the time. Like I can't do that. And like I learned that lesson early on in my career, and that like it's usually the advice that I give to any upcoming manager. Like, do not put the expectations that you've had on yourself on the people that you lead, because they will fail and you will disappoint yourself. Like you have to meet them where they're at and understand like how they operate, because they're not you. You're the only you in this entire planet. Nobody will ever be like you. They won't act like you. They won't respond like you. It's just not the way it's going to work. Like you have to meet them where they're at. The other thing, Dory, that I focus on is if I know something that's a weakness that I'm never going to change, I try to build up their strengths so the weakness doesn't come up. Like focusing on a weakness is just not the right thing to do as a rep. It's never going to get better. Like you have to build around the strengths so that the things that they might struggle with don't surface as often as you want. You don't want them to surface at all, but if you focus on their strengths, things that they do very, very well, it's very rare that the things that they struggle with will surface. Unless it's closing, because if they have struggle closing, then they probably don't belong in sales, right? So.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely focusing on the strengths versus the weaknesses. If you give too much focus to that, it just becomes bigger and bigger, and
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so now like moving along to the most important part, which is revenue, right? Salespeople are in sales to sell. So, boosting your sales team's effectiveness to create more revenue, really being successful in today's in sales today, you need a lot of preparation. There's practice, ongoing education, like it's an everyday process. And then you have all the new technology that's coming out, all of these advances and new techniques that are developed. And it is a lot. It's a lot to keep up with. It's a lot for sales reps. It's a lot for sales leadership to keep up with. And so, leading with that, I guess I'll throw this out to you, Sean. But what are you can start? But what are some time-saving, like efficiency tools that you or your team have seen like success with and using?
Yeah, so there's a few suggestions that I can have up front. Like, time-saving tools come from managing your time effectively. So that's the first piece of advice. So if you need time to prospect, you need to set aside time to prospect. You have to hold that as sacred. If you need time to follow up, you need to block time for follow-up and hold that time as sacred. If your prospect is asking for a meeting and it's during a time that you prospect, do not sacrifice your prospecting time to take that meeting. Ask the prospect for another time. It's okay. Same if it's during your follow-up session. Like, do not sacrifice your sacred time to move your deals forward for another prospect. Like, that is meant for everybody at that time. So time management is super critical in that point. So I definitely would highly recommend that you take the time to manage your calendar, manage it effectively, and know how you're going to start the day. Like, don't start the day with, I'm going to research all my calls before I have them. Like, that's something you should have done the night before. Like, take a look at tomorrow and how you prep for tomorrow. Write your action plan so when you wake up in the morning, you're getting ready to go. You're not writing your action plan that morning. So those are just some of the simple things that I recommend for my team. From an efficiency standpoint, one of the things that we know here at ZoomInfo is that traditionally reps are wasting about 2/3 of their day just flat out researching or Googling or trying to find contacts or something about a prospect that they're trying to go after, and they're banging on headquarter numbers. Like, nobody should have to experience those things. And that's the beautiful thing. Like, we have efficiencies built in here at ZoomInfo on its own, just by us being able to leverage our platform and what it is that we do every single day that we try to help our customers. So we leverage tools like websites to understand who's visiting zoominfo.com, who's visiting our pricing page. So that allows us to immediately find people that are interested in our product. Then we have services like Intent that help us understand who's in market for services like ZoomInfo or database management or anything that's related to go-to-market sales tools or conversational intelligence or anything like that. And then from like a shared perspective to drive better efficiencies, we have a service called Workflows, which allows you to tie in saved searches in ZoomInfo based off of website intent, and you identify your key buyers, and it will automatically be loaded into your CRM, whether it's Dynamics, HubSpot, Salesforce, Zoho. It'll automatically load into your CRM, and then you can create a list and immediately have a list that day for your account executives or your BDRs to call on. So another piece that we help our clients with is, once you build those lists, is like, how do you put it into action? Like, Workflow is great. Like, it'll send out an email, it'll do that, put it into your CRM, but action's required. And that's where our services Engage kind of comes into play. So Engage is our marketing automation tool that helps with dialing as well as email campaigns for individual sales users. So you can dial out from the platform. There's local number presence as well. So if like you're calling into Denver, the number will show up as if it's in Denver, or if you're calling Boston, vice versa, it'll show up it's coming from Boston. So you can immediately take the data that's in ZoomInfo and put it in a workflow, have it go into a sales flow in Cadence, and immediately email out into the world. What this is so powerful for is right now we have a large amount of our clients are, probably just about half of them are 50 employees and under. These are the growing companies in our world. I just found out this great stat. Of those 50 companies, that 50% of those companies, that's around 14,000 or so of our customers, they're growing on average at 20% year over year. That's crazy, just by using our data alone and going to acquire their next customer. So when you have ZoomInfo, you create the search for your territory, and every day you're getting updated with new contacts that you go out and sell to and talk to. That immediately puts at least 2 hours back in your day at a minimum, where you're not searching. So you can use that time to actively go find your next customer, move a deal forward just by leveraging the ZoomInfo tool. And the last piece from a coaching perspective, and I know I mentioned this earlier, when you have conversational recording, it provides immediate coaching. Like, we're all in this environment now where as sales leaders, we can't be on every call, but we can also capture the best of the best and share that with the team. But then also when coaching needs to happen, you can go in and make a comment or give them kudos when a great job happens and send that snippet out to somebody else. So like, those are some of the things that we can drive from an efficiency standpoint. So we can help you with driving pipeline. We can help you with improving your overall productivity of your team. And then we can help you drive better results through coaching, the right type of coaching, through coaching and advice on calls that are happening. So when you're able to work with ZoomInfo and drive your go-to-market motion all in one place, we're literally taking upwards of 12 sales technologies and consolidating into one business. It helps you drive better cost from a efficiency standpoint. Your CFO will love it when you have to write one check to one business, but ultimately you're getting a resource and advice from us. Like, ZoomInfo doesn't like hide in the shadows on how we became successful. We share that with the world and our own go-to-market motion, our own outbound strategy. But just having access to us alone from a small business standpoint, when you have workflows, when you have things like Chorus, it's like having a team of 15 BDRs per account executive out there helping you drive revenue, identify your next customer day in and day out. Like, we all want you to see that 20% growth year over year that we're seeing our clients see. And it's pretty awesome to be a part of. The fact that I get to use it every day and coach my reps on how to use it every day is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Having 2 hours back in your day, what salesperson doesn't want that? I mean, geez, I remember early on in my career when I was in sales, and it was just, I spent hours every day, like researching contacts, trying to find phone numbers, taking notes on a notepad after a conversation, like all of this stuff. It's amazing to see. So how far we've come.
And the one thing with Chorus Story that I want to bring up is that the transcription, right? The transcription from the call can be uploaded into Salesforce. So like, you don't skip a beat. So when you're pulling up your notes, you don't have to go back and sift through things or try to remember what they said. It's all right there in front of you. So you can write an effective follow-up that calls out the pain. Like, can you, like, if I had this when I was actively selling, like, I would have like probably tripled what I did just from an efficiency standpoint, because like the amount of work that I had to do to drive a deal is far less than what my team has to do today. And I try to remind them of that often, like back in the day when I was actively doing it, the struggles and efforts that we had to go through. Like, there's a lot of tools and things in place that help you be more efficient, still allow you to be a little bit more customized in what your follow-up is. But, you know, when you're relying on great data to drive great results, like, that's what you get, great results.
Anthony, anything you want to add there? We've definitely come a long way with sales technologies, that's for sure.
There was so much trouble for me at the beginning of my career because there was no information. Like, there was no LinkedIn. You couldn't see anyone's profile. You could have to look like at a business magazine in your city to try to figure that out. But the hardest thing for salespeople is getting good, accurate data. Like, I need the right email address. And Sean, I know other people in your space where getting the headquarters number is not all that hard to do. Like, I don't really need help with that. Like, I can do that just by going to the website. When you have the data, it's just speed to action. Like, there's no gap between this call and the next call because I know that the data is good and I can make the call. That's how you get efficiency. You get rid of the slack by not having to have a rep go look for data that you could get at a push of a button.
Yeah, and like, how many times when you call in the headquarters and you hit the dial by name directory, and like you fat finger something and you're not with the person that you need to, like you're wasting precious, precious moments. Like as a sales leader, our most valuable asset is time.
Right.
How your reps engage with it, how they make the most of it. Some of my best reps are working moms. And I say this all the time, like they can push more in an hour than most average reps can in a day. And it's amazing, absolutely amazing what they do. And my best reps, my top 3 reps are all women, and all of them are moms. And I respect everything that they do, but the efficiency that they bring to the table just by leveraging ZoomInfo literally get more done in an hour than an average rep can in a day.
It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess so in talking about like time-saving efficiency tools, that leads us into talking about success metrics. And so, Sean, I guess how would you recommend leaders and individual contributors better measure progress to ensure that they're hitting their quota?
This is a great question. So, and I've taken this with me in so many different ways, from when I was an individual contributor to a leader, because I find that these metrics work. So you have to have KPIs that are measurable. So the first thing that I always think about is in sales is prospecting. Like you have to make calls. So you have to have a minimum amount of calls that you want to make every day. Here at ZoomInfo, it's 20 calls a day. So they have to be making 20 calls a day. Because we have such a great inbound and outbound motion here at ZoomInfo, the reps have demos on their calendar already. So what I expect for them is to generate, of the 5 meetings that they have a day, a minimum of 2 new opportunities. So again, so you have 20 calls, they have to generate 2 new opportunities per day, which equates to about $500,000 in pipeline a month per rep. So then you create these opportunities. The other thing that you can think about is like, how are you moving them through the pipeline? So you have to have, for me, this is how I operate, is you have to have at least 5 active evaluations going on at any time. And what I mean by evaluation, whether they're trialing the service, whether we're doing a database analysis for them, or whether we're doing a guided trial for them, which we're walking through them or acting like we're putting ourselves in the buyer's shoes and showing them how they would use the tool if they were prospecting on their own. So those are the 3 ways that you can really evaluate ZoomInfo. So you have to have 5 of those going on at any given time. Now, from a sales stage perspective, for us, that would be items that are in validated fit. Once you identify what's in validated fit and you have 5 active trials going on, when trials are good and things are going well, you have the right KPIs against the trials, you're sending out proposals because people get interest. So for my team and my group, you have to have at least 6 active proposals out at all times. And for us, with our conversion rate at around 30%, I know at any given time, about 2 of those are going to close. So those are the metrics that I measure as far as pipeline goes. Some other things that I measure is timely follow-up. So you have to, if you have to have a demo, you have to have that follow go out that day. And then you have to, these are mandatory for me, send a custom video. We use Vidyard here at ZoomInfo. So you have to create a custom video specific to the buyer. One, it shows that you're listening, and provide customized smart touches to them. So those are the metrics that I measure against, Ori. It really matters to each business what they do and what their conversion rate is. But what I like 10, having at least 10 demos a week, having 5 active trials going on, having 6 items out in proposal at all times, and setting 1 active Vidyard and having 20 calls. It was the 20, 10, 5, 6, 2, 1 rule. Sorry about that. I had to do math quickly in my head, but those are the minimums that you have to have. So you have to set a standard of a minimum that you want to measure against, because you can't just give somebody a computer and say, good luck, and go find meetings. You have to give goals and KPIs for them to measure themselves against. And then it has to be visibly stack ranked. So I have a dashboard that goes out every 8 a.m. every day that highlights where everybody is, shows them where they are on the dashboard, how many calls were made, how many emails went out, how many active trials we have going on. and how many items we have in purchasing decisions. So it has to be front and center so they know where they are and where they need to get to.
Yep. Yep. Roadmaps are important.
Yeah.
When you went through all those numbers, I thought you were just reading off phone numbers. Like
yeah.
There was a lot of numbers there. That's a long.
I didn't start with 555 though, you know.
Well, I'm just looking at the time. So I think we can open it up, everybody, for Q&A. If you would like to submit a question, you can use the Q&A chat box, and our experts would love to answer them. So feel free to submit those. And I am just looking, it looks like we have a question from Steve. And Sean, this may be for you. The question is, can you give more examples of your SMART goals for your team?
Yeah, sure. Let me just give me 1 second, and I'll just I just got to bring up some of the ones that they put out there for my team. So while I dig up my file, just give me 1 second.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to, and again, if you have a question, feel free to submit it in the Q&A chat box. We definitely have a few minutes, so feel free to share that. It looks like it's pretty active, so we have some questions coming in, which is fantastic.
Yep. So I'll give you an example. So again, it's got to be, just so you know, for those that aren't familiar with it, it's got to be specific. It has to be measurable. It has to be achievable. It has to be realistic, and it has to be time bound. So for example, one of my reps, one of her goals were pick up one new account every day, have $50,000 in ZoomInfo sold by the 15th of every month, and increase her conversion rate by an additional 10%. And I will tell you that she smashed this. So her, she picks up a new account every day, so she sends them to me every day. She is right now she's at 70 grand for the month. And her conversion rate went from 31 to 43% so far this year. So, and then her long-term goal was to put together one semester of college savings to her two boys, and to have new windows and doors done. So I already know that she's handled the new windows and doors because we talk about it often, and she's having someone coming in to start to do that next week. So you have to have them written down. That's the other big thing. So I just had to pull the spreadsheet, and I don't just, we share them all as a team. Like, we talk about them as a team. It's not just that one individual. So everybody knows what everybody's goal is. So like, they can go back and talk about, hey, did you get that house yet? Or like, hey, did you do your windows yet? Or like, hey, how's it going getting to that conversion rate? Like, have you picked up the new accounts? Like, they find things to talk about. So the short term is always a little bit business related, and the long term is a little bit more personal related.
Got it.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, I like the personal aspect. Keeps everybody motivated. Okay, so this question here we have, it's coming from Andy. And the question is, how do you roll out the KPI plan to a team? What's the ramp up time and process look like?
I think that's me too. So I set the standard at the beginning of the year. So everybody knows it. So like, when they're coming in to work here, it's like the first thing that I tell them. Like, they may not even have been freshly involved in training yet, Dory. So they know what the KPIs are. Like, here's what I measure against. So it's something that I deliver in the beginning of every quarter and remind them of once a month. Like, hey, these are the things that we're measuring against. So again, like, you have to be front and center. And the other thing is, like, you make sure it's visible. So through Salesforce and in the dashboards that I created, like, it's all visible. The measurements there at each of the reports that I have that bring up the chart that deliver all the information. Like, we have to have this many this many that. So as long as it's visible, and that you stick to it, that's pretty much how I do it.
I think it takes, when you ask about the time, I think you have to give people about 3 or 4 weeks to start to adjust. They have to adjust their behavior. And I think that you can continue to have conversations along that path. But at about 4 weeks, if people haven't started doing the work that they need to do, you're going to have a different conversation. If they've not been required So Sean's a good leader. He has set his expectations. He's created a set of standards. And so people know what's expected of them. That's the most important thing at the beginning of accountability. What are you expecting me to do? And he has it all laid out in KPIs. But if they came from someplace else where they didn't have that kind of direction and they didn't have that kind of support, it can be jarring for them to now have these KPIs to meet on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. And it takes a little while. So you have to keep nudging them and helping them make sure that they change their beliefs and their behaviors and they start doing this work. If you don't start to see people come around quickly, you have to do something about it probably sooner rather than later. And a lot of people have worked in the past with people that didn't have standards, and they were allowed to not prospect if they didn't want to, or they could prospect 30 minutes a week or something like that. It didn't work for them, and that's why they're in a new role. But you want to make sure you give them enough time, but not so much time that they can wait forever. Like they need to get moving on those things.
Yeah, it's usually, and you're right, Anthony, it's usually about a 3-month ramp period, like from the beginning to where you're like fully up and going, at least like hitting the basics of the KPIs, which are making calls and running meetings. And again, like I said earlier, like having visible measurement, Dory, is super, super important there. Like you want to put it out there that, where am I against my peers, and how can I work to improve myself? And then also as a leader, when I look at this, I can immediately identify areas that I need to go and coach. So it helps me a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the thing is, like on the phone calls, I expect that KPI, like that's an easy one to hit, to make 20 phone calls. That's not a problem. But to have $50,000, done by the 15th, you're going to have to do some work to get to that point. So that's 3 months, 4 months. Like you're going to have to do the work before you get there. So you want to just pay attention to that.
Yep.
Great. All right, let's see. So again, any questions, folks, feel free to submit them in the Q&A chat. We have a question here from Jeff. And the question is, and this is a pretty common one, how many cold calls, emails should you make before you give up on a client? How long should you keep calling? How many emails? It's, I don't know, maybe Sean or.
I know that it takes up to, if you don't have good contact information, it can take you well over 100 dials just to get a hold of one person. And like I will plug us again. So with a direct dial or a mobile phone number, if you have a direct dial, it's 1 in 10. If you have a mobile phone number, it's like 1 in 6 that somebody's going to get back to you. So, I'd like to put the question back to the audience. I know they can't answer, but like, do you feel there's a good fit in the customer and that you should be working with them? Then don't give up. Like, you shouldn't give up. You should be multi-threaded and find other people to talk to and engage with. Like, don't ever give up. So like, what's enough? I don't know, until you get a meeting. Like, that's how I look at that. Like, I don't know what you think about that, Anthony.
Harvey McKay, who wrote a book called Swim with the Sharks Without Being Eaten Alive, and Beware the Naked Man That Offers You His Shirt, and his third book was called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. In one of his books, I think Swim with the Sharks, he said when he got his first job in sales, he was working with some mature, grizzled veterans, and he asked that very question. He said, when do you give up on a prospect? And the senior guy there said, they die or you die. And that's it. But I would add that if they did die, maybe call for 3 or 4 more weeks just to make sure they're not faking their death. I mean, just stay after it, because to Sean's point, like if they're right for you, there's no reason to ever give up. Eventually they're going to have a change. And if you're either going to be calling them when that happens or you're not. So I would tell you, if there's something that you really want, stay with it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I will say that the last deal that I sold as an active rep took me 3.5 years, and I didn't give up. 3.5 year sales cycle. I did not give up, and I closed that deal for a whopper, like the largest new business deal ever at the company I was at. So don't give up. Like if you feel that there's a good fit, change your approach, change your subject line, put a video out there, make fun of yourself, like be creative. Like don't Don't keep doing the same stuff. So like, Anthony, have you heard the Greek story of Sisyphus?
Yeah.
Have you heard of that? So like, that's sales. Like, you push a rock up a hill, the month ends and that shit's rolling all the way back down that hill again, and you're starting all over again. So like, the whole point of that story is to make your life easier. There is like why you set goals to get to your number by the 15th. Create a repeatable process so it works. If you know there's a fit with a company, don't give up. Like, ask your sales leader to make a call into it. Like, find another voice. There's so many different techniques that you can leverage to get there. But my first piece of advice there, don't give up and find another person to talk to. Call HR in that company. Get some intel. You don't know what's going on. Like, find a new way. So, if you're going to, so many things that we talked about today, but I'm very passionate about this piece. Find a new way. Be creative. If we all sat there and gave up, like every time that we got to know what the hell are we doing in sales, like go for your 4th no, your 5th no, your 6th, your 7th, your 8th. If you feel that there's a fit and you can help that business, find a way.
True story. I called LCI Communications. They're right up in Dublin, like this direction from me where I'm standing right now. I called the decision maker 76 weeks in a row, always on Monday. I had this stack of index cards at the time. I would flip over and I would call all of them. On the 76th call, he said, "You've called me 1,000,000 times." And I had a CRM, and I said, "Actually, this is my 76th call." He goes, "Well, it felt like 1,000,000 to me." And I was like, he wasn't trying to praise my persistence at all. He said, "Listen, if you come out right now, I'll give you these orders." And I jumped immediately in my car and I drove over and I picked up his orders on the 76th week. And I'm like, why would I ever give up on anybody? It took me 7 years to win PetSmart. I thought Vicky would have to die before I would get an opportunity, but she didn't. She just got a new job. And the minute she was gone, I had a $2 million deal. She was the best gatekeeper I've ever run across. She had to actually get a new job before I could get that account. But it took me years. It took me years to do it. But you're prospecting anyway. What difference does it make if you make that call? Like, you're making calls anyway. No reason not to.
Yep.
Okay, we've got some more questions coming in. So there's a question here from Eric. Looks like he's in a sales leadership role. So I'm going to throw this out to you guys. So it was mentioned earlier, Goldilocks earlier, and I have used walking a tightrope. And I have used walking a tightrope. I struggle at times with a democratic bottom-up approach and a top-down directive approach when setting goals and expectations. Any tips in adapting an approach to drive results and cultural change where a sales culture isn't currently present?
Well, there's always a culture present, even if it's not an intentional one. There's always one there. The question about whether or not it's top down or if it's a democratic sort of consensus building approach. I'm writing my 5th book right now about leading growth. And one of the mistakes that we make is thinking that we should be democratic and build consensus on our team. Well, sometimes we should. Other times we should be autocratic and we should say, these are my standards. And I'm not going to have 500 standards because nobody can manage that. But on the few things that I care about, like I'll go with Sean on this. He's nice with 20 calls. That's great for a team because they're busy, but I want 90 minutes of prospecting a day from an enterprise rep. I want 90 minutes a day. And I'm not going to ask you to do that. I'm going to tell you it's a non-negotiable for me. I need you to do 7.5 hours out of your 40 hours on prospecting every single week, because I know if you do it every single week, we're going to have plenty of opportunities. And my great fear is not having enough opportunities. That's what I'm afraid of. So if we can correct that, that's great. So sometimes you have to be a bureaucrat. Sometimes you have to be strategic. Sometimes you have to be a consensus builder. And sometimes you have to be an autocrat. There's about 7 or 8 different roles that you have to play as a leader. And you have to recognize your team might need you to be an autocrat in some areas. And I'm going to describe Sean as an autocrat in this way. Not that he's Stalin or anything like that, but he's got standards, and those KPIs are his standards. And he does that because that's what's going to make his team successful. He needs them to be successful. And if they do what he asks them to do, and they make those 20 calls and they have their 5 meetings, they're going to be wildly successful and happy. They're going to be taking care of their family. Like, all the good things happen because he set a standard. And you have to decide which person you need to be for that particular instance. I'm not a person that's going to make everybody suffer over keeping their CRM up to date, except for opportunities. Like, opportunities, they better be in there and there better be notes. But I can't make everything a non-negotiable. But prospecting I can make non-negotiable, and I think that that's what Sean has done. Like, you're going to do 20 calls a day. Why? Because it's like eating, going to the gym. It's like, you do this, you keep that maintenance up, you're going to be wildly successful. So our job is to make sure they're wildly successful. So we don't always get to be a consensus builder. Sometimes we have to be a different kind of leader. Sean, just give me 1 minute on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there, Anthony. And like, it's very interesting as Anthony was going through the sort of 7 or 8 different hats you have to wear as a leader. I know it's overwhelming, but we do. And on top of all those things that Anthony just mentioned, like, we have to be a motivator, and those KPIs are like what define the motivation of it. I almost wish CEB came out with a book instead of the Challenger, a little bit more associated with the leader side. So there's, like, for those of you that haven't, as a sales professional, read the Challenger, I highly recommend doing it, because it helps you understand, like, you have to wear different hats as a sales professional, but as a leader, like, you know, Anthony hit the nail on the head with all those different hats that you have to wear. Like, there are things that you have to define as non-negotiable, and if you don't have the right culture, sometimes you don't have the right people, right? So there's certain things to think about from a people perspective as well, because that's what defines the culture of your group. So if you have one person that's a complainer that can ripple affect your entire team, you have to remove the problem. We are in sales and we are leaders, and if there's a problem, you have to remove it. So I'm not saying you have to be a hitman, but like, you have to correct the problem immediately. So you have to set the standard. You have to put yourself in a position where there are non-negotiables, and you can't be flexible on them. There's no gray. It's very clear of like what you want to have and what you see as successful. And again, like I said earlier, when you set those KPIs, those non-negotiables, it gives you an area to go back to and coach. But like, if the culture side is a worry, then like, you have to, that's something that you need to change and lead through change there. And if it's a one individual that's creating that water cooler effect and gossip effect, you have to make sure that you remove that problem quickly. There's one thing that you have to do as a leader. You have to hire quickly, but you also equally have to fire quickly. I know that's controversial, but like, you have to, I don't know what the stat is, Anthony. Is it like we're 50% good on our hires because we're making a 50-50 shot every time we hire somebody, and whether they're going to be successful or not, or whether they're coachable? There's a lot of factors that are involved there. But like, if you recognize go ahead.
I'll do this in 1 minute. So the 1 minute, and then we have to give it back to Dory. I'm going to coach, I'm going to train, I'm going to develop, I'm going to motivate, I'm going to do everything I can. But if you don't pick up your end of the stick, I can't do this. Like, if I'm doing the work, but you're not willing to make the behavioral change, then I either have to put you in a role that you can be successful in or remove you. I mean, so it's always like coach first, then if not, transfer them to the role that they can be successful in. And then after that, you have to let them go. That's the only choices that you have. There's 3 of them, and you just always work them in that order.
It's kind of reminds me of like when you go to the gym and you hire a personal trainer, like they can show you the ropes and the workouts you need to do, but if you don't do them, like, you know, nothing's going to happen. So, well, anyway, I know we are at the top of the hour, so I want to really thank Sean and Anthony just for their fantastic insight today. I hope all of you sales leaders out there and sales professionals have enjoyed this time. We hope it's helped you. You've got some nuggets that you can take back and implement within your teams. So thanks, Sean. Thank you, Anthony. And to all of our attendees today, we will be sending out the webinar recording to this event within 48 hours. So please keep your eye on your inbox for that. And certainly feel free to share that with other colleagues, sales leaders in your community that may benefit. So we want to thank you all, and we hope to see you again at another ZoomInfo webinar. Have a great day. Bye.